Alrighty, sounds good. And I also have for Secret of Mana a co-commentator here, which is very well versed in this game, probably more than me. And, well, that someone is Crow, who did actually the very first run of this marathon with a one controller category.
Hello everyone, I'm happy to be here. I'll try to assist Yagamoth with providing commentary throughout the duration of a much longer run than the one you just saw there.
Indeed. And well, I would say, let's just get this going. Also for reference, Secret of Mana one controller, unlike Goof Troop one player 2 controller, is not as much of a gimmick, but an actual category. Although both are very high skill ceiling and pretty interesting. This run here will be very different from the one controller run, and also I would like to point out, just before I start, actually I might as well be able to start one and then explain that, so give me a second. Let's just go with SNES. And there we go. Let's go. Alrighty, I'm going to be using a multi-tap for this run here. So, if you don't know Secret of Mana is a action RPG for the Super Nintendo, and one of its main features is that you can play it with up to 3 players at a time. For that, because Super Nintendo only has 2 controller ports, you need a multi-tap device. This is one of those multi-tap devices that I actually had as a kid, and those multi-tap devices here, they have a switch. You can turn it off and on and off and on. You get the idea. What that switch does, it tells the Super Nintendo as to whether there are more than 2 controllers connected or not. And that will actually be relevant, and I will explain as to why a bit later. So, however, well, let me introduce myself, I guess. First, I am Yagamoth, as you may or may not know, or could read, and I'm mainly a one-player 2-controller runner of Secret of Mana, although I have dabbled into various other categories for this game quite a bit, and it is one of my favorite games, so I really like running this, and I like any excuse I can get to play this game again. So in order for us to advance the plot is going to be pretty straightforward. The boy here is our main character, and I will refer to him as the boy throughout the run, and he falls down, unfortunately, his waterfall, and well, he finds a sword, and from there on he is supposed to save the world. But, let's see. Crow, can you introduce yourself real quick? What are you doing,
Sure.
And how do you get here?
So I'm doing great. I am Crow, and whenever I play this game, I usually do the one controller category. You may have seen this at the beginning of the marathon. If you did not, and if you like what you see during this run here, I do suggest taking a look back at the one controller run, because it does most of the bosses in a very different way than what you're about to see in this run here. In this run, what you will see is the weapon charge glitch, where he's going to be trading weapons between characters, and in order to do that, he wants to get as much weapon experience as he can in the early game. He needs 2 weapon levels on the sword and 1 weapon level on the spear. So that's what you're about to see in the Raybite Forest coming up here. He's going to be defeating Raybites to give himself weapon experience.
Indeed, and just more general mechanics. With the B button you swing the sword, you have a regular swing based on how far away you're standing from the enemy, and a little bit of randomness. You have different swings and different damage rolls. Also, you can see at the stamina bar at the bottom, that is the numbers that are counting up. Once it reaches 100%, I can run. I cannot run before that. Also, generally I will not swing before 100% unless I know exactly how much damage I will deal to the enemies, and it will kill them. So, the
Another important mechanic here is that whenever he dashes with the A button, that also expends his stamina. So he needs to be careful about when and where he starts dashing, because he cannot even turn his direction at all once he starts. So it's important to make sure that he doesn't put himself on stamina cooldown when at a point where he either wants to run again or needs to attack an enemy.
Indeed. The 50/50 at the bottom, that is my HP. I have 50 out of 50 HP. And in the top right corner of the portrait, you see the boy's face, and there's a 1. That 1 is the first controller, indicating I'm using this controller here. And you will see there being a 3 throughout the run, because I'm going to use a second controller, which is plugged into the third character slot, or controller slot, and I will be explaining the significance of this. But for now, this is just kind of the basic plot. The characters, or the villagers here, are a bit scared because we picked up the sword that was supposedly protecting the village from monsters, and now monsters are roaming around, and also the Mantis Ant is attacking the boy who just picked up the sword. The sword is the mana sword, but unfortunately it's currently a bit rusty, so not particularly powerful, so we will be doing that. Either way, first boss here is the Mantis Ant. And let me not mess up this too much. Crow, could you explain it?
Sure. The Mantis Ant is a pretty thoroughly manipulatable boss by this game standards. If you're too far away from him, he will cast a spell. If you're to one of his sides, he will swing that arm only. If you are above him, then he will jump. It turns out all of those things are just a lot slower than if you stand right in his face and try to just trade blows with him, 1 for 1. If he smashes you into a corner, then half of your attacks will become stab attacks. The game changes which attack animations you do based on how close you are to the enemy, and it turns out that the stab attack is shorter range and slower than other attacks. So if you get a stab for your 1 attack, the next attack will be too slow to hit the ant. So then he tried to dodge to the side, but because he had caused the Mantis Ant to shuffle to the left a little bit earlier, he did not actually have enough room to dodge like he was trying to. And then he wound up taking 1 hit anyway. Still not too much of a time loss there. Each time you make a mistake against the Mantis Ant, or if he randomly chooses to block, it's like a second and a half or so of time loss, so not a huge deal.
Indeed. So, after the Mantis Ant is defeated, plot goes on a bit more. That old man you just saw, that is Gemma, one of the old Mana Knights, and he tells us to go to the Water Palace in order to power up the Mana Sword, since we are apparently now the hero and wielder of the sword, and simultaneously get banished from our home village. That is just kind of a convenient excuse to go on a journey to save the world. So we have less than 2 hours to do so, let's get to it. Also, I think I killed about 7 or 8 rabbits before entering the Mantis Ant fight, which means I need 2 or 3 more in order for me to level up the sword. So, leveling up swords and weapons in this game is actually a bit different from leveling up your character, because it allows you to charge up your weapon to specific levels, and I think it's 3. Let's see. In order for you to deal more damage, and wow, that's pretty rare. So I just...
Oh, wow.
That's really rare.
Yeah, the Lullabuds are trap enemies. They have a trap hitbox that is just perpetually below and to the right of them, so that's why he was staying so far away. Very rarely, they are allowed to cast Sleep Flower, which makes your character go unconscious. So long as he only has 1 character in his party, any crowd control status effects, be it Sleep Flower or Balloon from a Blat later on, he's just going to have to sit it out. He has no way to deal with it because you're not allowed to pause the game whenever your character that you're controlling is hit by a status effect. Usually the solution to that is to press the select button and take control of one of the other characters that's not currently being hit, and then you toss a medical herb or whatever to fix the first character. But until he gets another party member, he can't do that.
Indeed. Alrighty. Plot goes on. We are now supposed to seal all the 8 mana seeds throughout the world in order to power up the mana sword all the way But you will see very soon that we are just kind of not going to be doing that in this run, because we don't really have much of a reason to. What mana seeds do for you, sealing them actually increases your character's power just a little bit, as in I will be doing 20 damage with the sword after I return from the War Palace instead of the other one. And also spells, if we had any spells, would be able to level up just a little bit further than before, or more specifically +1 level. So we gain the mana seed of water here. We also gain a new weapon, the spear. You can freely change between your weapons on each character, and I will be leveling up to the spear also to level 1 in order for me to execute a overcharge glitch that you will be seeing in about 20 minutes, I say. Probably a bit earlier than that. Either way, what I'm going to be doing here is I will be saving. Press start select L and R at the same time, and that actually causes the game to soft reset. And that will be a bit more important later. For now, it just skips about 2 text boxes and I don't have to walk all the way outside. Switch to the spear.
The reason that works there is because whenever you save the game does not remember where you were when you made the save. It remembers where you entered that room. And that will help us do another glitch later on where we will move into the initial cutscene of the game.
Indeed, that will be relevant. So here, I need to kill a total of 11 enemies to level up the spear. Currently I am only level 2. As long as I'm not more than 1 level over the enemy's level, I will gain full weapon experience, and I only need to kill 11 enemies to level up the weapon all the way. Also, I'm doing here a fair bit of spawning manipulation in order for me to spawn a lot of weak enemies, since it doesn't really matter how strong the enemies are as long as they give me full weapon experience, and they are just quick and easy to kill. And spawn manipulation is actually a pretty big deal throughout this game. It will not be too apparent in the next cave, because there's not much you can do about it, but it will be very, very relevant very soon. So Seeker of Mana... excuse me, go ahead.
Okay, in most areas, there can be up to 3 enemies on the screen at once, and he's going to try to make sure that the enemies that show up are the enemies he either wants to be in his way so he can kill them, or are not in his way so they don't slow him down. In that specific area, he can only have 2 enemies out, though.
Yes, that's a special area. So, alrighty. And if you may explain the glitch here.
We are about to swindle the swindler, which is what I like to call it. This is Neco. He is a merchant cat, a cat that you may remember stealing all of your money if you play this game casually, particularly in the Witch's Castle, also in the Frosty Forest area. He sells things for twice their normal cost, but he just did a glitch there where he bought 2 different items. He looked at the second item in his inventory, then he sold everything. At that point, the game remembered he was still looking at his second item, and so whenever he went back into the selling menu, the game failed to acknowledge that the item ring was actually empty. And so it just showed him a bunch of nonsensical items. He sold from the last item slot that he could access there, and he put a glitched item there by selling literally nothing. And if you sell nothing in this game, it turns into an item called Blat, which is worth about 30,000 gold. And he only sold 1, which means that he technically still has 7 Blats near the end of his inventory, which hopefully will never become relevant. If he winds up using all of the items in one of his item slots, and then he has to repurchase items of some type later, he could wind up getting that Blat into one of his item slots, and then if you use that item, the game actually crashes.
Yep.
Another thing he has done during that time is he has bought 2 of each of the consumable items he wanted to have. He will use that fact later for a equipment trashing glitch that will let him have effectively 8 of all of those items that he purchased.
Indeed. Also, I actually purchased something that I don't usually purchase. I bought a armor, an armband and a helmet just in case I get caught by those enemies, because I have only one character. This run is extremely volatile in that they can just combo me to death if I get caught. Just having anything equipped on your equipment slots reduces the chance of getting killed tremendously, because before you have all item slots covered, essentially your arms, your body and your head, you do not have proper amounts of evasion, which means you generally just take a lot more damage. As in, let's put it this way, you just take about 10-15 more damage per hit. That is
the effectiveness of your defense power is scaled by what your evasion rating is. So until you have a full set of equipment, your evasion rating is so low that all of the defense that your character supposedly has just through their base stats don't count. And so he could have, if he didn't buy those things, possibly have gotten wrecked by the goblins that he was trying to defeat in order to give himself weapon experience.
Indeed. I didn't even get hit, so that was completely pointless, but hey, who knows. Secret of Mana is one of those games where you have pretty much everything planned, or you want to do stuff exactly like that, but in a lot of cases, execution is pretty difficult and very finicky, so it can easily happen that you make a small mistake, and that small mistake can blow up tremendously. 3, 4...
So at this point, Yagamoth is counting out extra equipment that he's buying that he doesn't actually intend to have equipped. He's going to use a glitch called the equipment trashing glitch here. He's going to move to a particular spot in the screen, and then he's going to throw away equipment while he is wearing it. This causes the game to attempt to unequip that equipment after it's already been deleted. The game does this entirely wrong, and it winds up trying to unequip an item from a place in the game's memory determined by where you are standing on the screen left and right. More specifically, where the trash can icon is currently being displayed. He pointed the game's memory towards his consumable items inventory. Since he had 2 of all of his consumable items, it turns out that having 2 of an item is marked in the same way that the game marks that the boy has a piece of equipment assigned to him. So the game gladly, quote-unquote, unequipped all of those items, and now he has 0 of all of those items. You're never supposed to have an item in your inventory and yet have 0 of it. So in effect, whenever he uses one of those items, it's going to wrap back to having 7 of that item. So in practice, he now has 8 of all of the different types of consumable items that he bought from Neco. And hopefully that will be all the more consumable items he's going to need throughout the game.
Indeed, thank you very much. So, alrighty, upcoming here you see the second boss. This is a good demonstration of what normally do with a charge attack. The sword is level 1, so I can charge it up to level 1, and it deals 50% more damage than it would normally deal with just a normal swing. And what I'm doing here is I time my swings in a way that the Tropicalo will get hit as soon as he pops up, and then he stays. I'm not entirely sure why Tropicalo decides to stay above ground here while you hit him pretty much as early as possible with a charge attack, but he does that pretty consistently, and so we can get him 2 charge attacks every time, because normally whenever you hit Tropicalo, he will actually dive back down after, well, getting hit. So it would take a lot longer to try and defeat him. If you're lucky, you can kill, well, Tropicalo within 4 cycles, which I just did. I think I got a critical hit there at the end, because I'm pretty sure my damage rolls were not quite high enough. Either way, Tropicalo is a pretty easy boss. After you defeat a boss, your characters get fully healed, which is pretty convenient. On top of that, you get a orb, in this case a spear orb, and that allows you to upgrade your weapons. We are not going to do this in this run, because we already have the sword leveled up or upgraded from the blacksmith, and it can now be leveled up towards level 2, which will be our next goal in the upcoming section. Also here we gain a partner in our team, and this is going to be the Sprite. The Sprite is basically just a really weak physical character, however, he will learn spells that would be pretty devastating if we ever were to use them. You name your secondary characters, and technically all your characters, with as short names as possible, because that does not save you just time by entering those names, but it also saves you time by having them displayed in text boxes. Each character for a character's name costs you 1 frame per display, so it actually adds up quite a bit over the course of a run. And I will also set up my secondary controller to have a upside down control scheme at the same time as I equip the Sprite for having basic equipment. And also about the equipment, I think we have a pretty strong one in that one, don't we, Crow? With the power wrist.
Yeah, the power wrist also increases your damage by 5. Every accessory in this game happens to have some sort of special effect associated with them, but this game does not actually have tooltips, so you have to just look up and find out what they are.
So, control scheme is now upside down, and I hold the controller upside down, which will be easier for me in the future. Also, oh, come on, use that. What I'm going to be doing frequently, you will see reach over to the multi-tap, disable the button that I showed earlier on the multi-tap, in order to tell the SNES that, well, we are now no longer using a third controller, and then I enable it back again. What that does for me is actually a bit special and a little bit obscure, but it's a intended function of the game. Whenever you have a third character controlled, what that does for you is the game keeps checking once in a while as to whether that character is still being able to be played by having a multi-tap connected to the SNES. By me disabling the button here, I can just essentially tell the SNES, okay, I no longer have a multi-tap connected by switching it off, and essentially the game automatically reassigns the third controller to being AI controlled as a character. Or, if there is no other character, it reassigns the controls back to the first controller. So that will actually be relevant a bit later.
I actually read through the technical guide for designers for SNES games, and in fact, the designers for Super NES games are required to make sure that the game does not crash or become unplayable if the multi-tap gets disconnected. And so here, Yagamoth just went across a gap through the backside by attacking a whip pull. Whenever you attack a whip pull that is supposed to be triggered with the whip weapon, and then you jump across the gap, the game makes you able to walk through walls first, and then it considers whether you should actually do that or not. In that brief interim, a player other than the player that had attacked the whip pole initially can continue whatever motion they were already doing. In this case, it was the level 1 sword attack, which makes him jump forward. And he used that in order to walk through walls and get into the forest through the backside. This dodged the plot event where he was supposed to have picked up the girl. So if you pay attention to the dialogue coming up, you will see a rather interesting name that has been by default assigned to the girl.
Indeed. So the name will be, let's see, we should see it in just about a second here. There it is. Go 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 go. Which is kind of weird, but that's kind of what happens if you never actually give a name to the third member of your party that is not in your party right now. And that is the lady that we are going to be getting later, but not just now. In the meantime, I've been actually killing quite a few enemies to level up my sword towards level 2, and I should be reaching level 2 sword as soon as I kill just a few more enemies over here. Also, in various areas you see me activating the second controller in order to gain a little bit of an advantage. That is not absolutely required, but it does make the entire process of running through the areas a lot easier, since a lot of you may have played Secret of Mana, and a lot of you may remember the, well, AI-controlled characters being rather questionable in their approach on how to not get lost or getting stuck. For that matter, for anyone who does not know, you cannot have your characters be too far away apart from the screen. The screen will get blocked from you walking any further, so you can only walk so far apart from each other. So having an AI character lag behind or getting caught on anything is actually pretty bad in order for you to progress through quickly. Alrighty, and here we are going to face every casual player's nightmare, the Spiky Tiger, and we are going to do, well, we're going to defeat Spiky Tiger in a few easy steps. First, I'm going to be using a barrel on the sprite, which I already used, so the barrel completely protects the sprite from pretty much everything that the Spiky can do, with one exception, but that's mostly not relevant. 2, I start charging up the weapon towards level 2. Then I switch out with the sprite the weapon for the spear, the game freaks out, and I one-shot the Spiky Tiger. And that's how you defeat the Spiky Tiger pretty quickly. So, what did we just do there? The short version of that is, I put a level 2 charge attack from the sword onto the spear, which is a level 1 weapon. I think it's a bit more difficult overall to explain, but that's the gist of it.
Right, so whenever he charges up the spear to level 1 and then swaps the spear with the sword, the game sees that he already has the charge bar completely full, and now he has a weapon that can go up to level 2, so it instantly snaps him from level 1 charge to level 2 charge. Once he has level 2 charge, and then he swaps from the sword back to the spear using the second player, he can then have a higher current charge level that he's charged up to than the maximum he's supposed to be able to go to. And the game just handles that completely wrong. It keeps the charge bar full, but it keeps ticking up the charge level continuously, and he probably did about a level 30 charge attack there for incredible damage, which one-shot the boss.
Indeed. To give you a frame of reference, a late game charge attack takes about 20 seconds to charge up all the way to level 8, which is the regular maximum level. So we just essentially one-shot those bosses because we charge up our weapon charges way too high. Also, after the fight, we picked up a chest which contained a new weapon, the whip, and this is how you are normally supposed to get across those gaps here with those rope holes. You equip a whip on the character, stand in place, smash the whip across, and your party jumps. That's the intended way. The way I did it earlier, as Crow explained, is just kind of taking advantage of the fact that whenever you hit a rope hole, you can just walk through walls, and that will come into play later as well. So for now, in a lot of cases we just kind of know where to go and we don't necessarily have to visit each plot point, so we skip any plot point that is not necessary. That's going to be a bit awkward, but it's okay. Alright, here we go. So this boss here, he actually has 2 phases. If you deal 300 damage, he would transform into his second phase, but if you deal 600 damage in one swing, he will instead just instantly die. So that's what we're doing here. Goodbye. And here is another little trick. The boy is always the guy who uses the magic rope. Magic rope transports you back to the entrance of an area. However, it's always the boy using the magic rope, which kind of makes it sound a bit weird, but that's how the game is programmed. What that means, in short, is that the sprite and the girl, once she's in a party, can actually move during that magic rope animation, and we can still walk into cutscene triggers. I just activated magic rope and ran into the cutscene trigger for the Undine, which is the summon spirit of water and gives you water spells to use in combat and also generally. And well, that is just a little bit faster than doing it all the way over there. Also here once again, going to be disabling the multi-tap in order for me to not having to manually disable the second controller from the game, since you can only press start to select or unselect a character as long as you have control over said characters. If you are disabled, like you are ballooned or anything like that, just everything where you cannot even open the menu, you cannot normally disable your secondary characters. Also in special instances, I'm not sure why, you can actually not even disable your other characters for a while longer. Like in front of the waterfall down in Gaia's navel, you can't unselect the second character with their start button for, I don't know, 10 seconds or so, which is really weird. Alrighty, because this is a one-player 2-controller run and I only have 2 characters, it is really easy to mess up the next section, so I'm going to briefly save here, just to make sure that in case I die, which it's kind of unlikely, but it can still happen, I will at least not have to start over from too far away. In general, the further we get into the game, the less effective our armor is going to get, and essentially the more damage we take in comparison to how much health we have. This next area is actually especially dangerous to traverse through, since there are goblin-type enemies, which can easily combo you just to death by, well, hitting you again and again and again until you're just straight up dead. And because I only have 2 characters, it's a bit more tricky to recover from getting caught compared to having 3 characters, so I'm not quite as confident running through this area. Plus the boss is going to use an ability that hits all characters. Alrighty, let's see. There we go. Also, whenever AI-controlled characters are running, they do not use up their stamina bar, so you can just switch to them by pressing the select button and just start running with them again, because, well, they still have 100% stamina. So I take advantage of that in many areas. Further, you can see me running in a pretty weird pattern sometimes. I do this to manipulate spawns. For example, it depends on how I approach the next section here, whether the group of goblins down below spawns or whether they don't. What I'm doing here is I keep the screen scroll to the right and this goblin here spawns. If I scroll the screen any further to the left, those goblins over there would not have spawned, and well, that means it would have had more goblins on the left side of the rope hole here, which would have been pretty annoying. So, alrighty. Switching back to the sword for the sprite in order for us to take advantage of the weapon swap. So, a lot of people may think this looks kinda difficult with 2 controllers, and admittedly, it's not that easy. However, it's actually a lot more convenient and simple to do compared to doing this entire thing with just 1 controller. I think, Crow, can you tell a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. The 1 controller category for this game can also use the weapon charge glitch, but it has to constantly access the AI action grid that controls how the AI chooses to behave. And it's awkward to the point where, for example, in this boss right here, where you saw that the boss just barely didn't have enough time to cast a spell to retaliate before the weapon charge glitch came in and finished him off. In this boss, if I tried to do that with 1 controller, the odds were pretty good that I would wind up dying. Whereas here, Yagamoth was able to completely control exactly when his charge attack came out and which charge attack animation he did. And therefore, he was able to pretty safely defeat the Fire Gigas. But if Fire Gigas did manage to get his spell off, if Yagamoth had paused the game just a couple frames too late, then the boss would instead have cast a spell that's supposed to target the full party, but the game expects you at this point to have 3 party members, not just 2. So rather than the damage being spread out over 3 party members, it's spread out over 2, and that's basically enough to kill his party in 1 shot. in order to keep himself safe from that, he told the sprite to cast a spell. Most likely, that spell's damage would not be required to finish off Fire Gigas, even if he had released his attack early. But whenever you are casting magic in this game, the spellcaster is just outright invincible. So that would have protected the sprite from getting killed had the Fire Gigas actually cast.
Indeed, and that's also why I saved just before that, because if I'm just a little bit off, it can easily be that you die to the Fire Gigas. There is backup strategies and backup setups, but not all of those are terribly reliable, so this is as simple as it gets. Alrighty, I think the next area is actually a bit of a nice illustration as to how much we do with spawn and not spawn manipulation. Also, if you noticed, by the way, we just got Gnome, the summon spirit of Earth, and now we have, well, Earth spells on our disposal, which we need to progress on later. And we did not go and seal the Earth's mana seed because, well, you just simply don't have to, so we didn't. Instead, we just keep going into those ruins here, where here this lady is, and our invisible character is just going to get slapped, which no one is seeing because, well, she's invisible. Either way, in this area here, everything is planned, but everything can go wrong. That is pretty much the illustration I would like to paint for Seeker of Mana speedrunning in a nutshell. So, we enter this area on the right. The Tomato Man on the left should never get in our way, except for a few instances where he just moves straight to the right and stops there. Then in this next area, I manipulate the sprite to hit the sword without, well, the sprite getting hit, and he just goes past, which works out most of the time. Then here, I dash up left. Sometimes the Tomato Man gets in your way and stops your party, sometimes they don't. Here, I actually dash up left against the wall in order to despawn, or, well, spawn manipulate to have no enemy spawn over there. And over here, and do this. As you see, I, in a lot of cases, just straight up run into wall, kind of sideways, and that is all to manipulate enemies. Everything should be planned, everything can be messed up, and it also highly depends on what the enemies in previous sections do for you to traverse through. That was actually a pretty smooth run over through all.
As a general rule, if you are walking diagonally, the game is much less likely to acknowledge where it's supposed to be spawning the next sets of enemies. So diagonal motion tends to make enemies not spawn, whereas walking straight up, down, left, right will make enemies show up, and hopefully you get enemies that won't block your path to appear, and you prevent enemies that would block your path from showing up.
Indeed. So, here we have the wall face, who is the first boss who has evasion rating. What does evasion rating do for us, or against us, Crow?
So, a lot of the bosses in this game have the ability to evade your attacks. In practice, essentially every enemy has the same evasion rating if they can evade at all. And if they can evade, then near the beginning of the game it's around 40%, and later on in the game it'll go down to about 30% as the boy gains some agility. And that's the chances that your attack will just not do anything, and the game fails to explain to you why it is that the attack missed. The sequel to this game, Seeking Densetsu 3, will at least put up a little miss indicator so you understand what happened. But most bosses just don't react at all whenever you do a physical attack against them and the attack misses. In the event of a miss, he would have to try the overcharge again. And in order to account for that possibility, he has done what we call retaining the overcharge. So whenever the time came for him to do his attack, he paused the game and then released the B button to indicate that he wants to attack with the boy as the game was starting to unpause. But then before the action actually resumed, he then pressed the B button again. This gave the game enough time to acknowledge that he was trying to release his charge attack, but not enough time to acknowledge that the overcharge level should be reset back to 0. This left him with a overcharge ready to go to just do the process again and again if the wall happened to dodge many times in a row. And by the way, it's kind of silly that the first boss that can dodge your attacks is literally a face embedded into a wall.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I always like to justify it kind of like, I guess he's blinking really fast or something like that. It's weird. Either way, when you're like me as a kid, I had no idea why am I not hitting that guy? Am I standing in the wrong spot? Am I using the wrong weapon? And yeah. Also, fun fact, certain bosses cannot be hit by ranged weapons at all, as in projectiles. Just doesn't work. It's kind of odd. But I think there are probably programming reasons as to why that's the case, but it's just kind of obscure a bit. So, alrighty. Either way...
Speaking of sorry.
Yeah, either way, for this boss here and the previous boss, we actually, in total, if we get a low damage roll, which occurs, I don't know, 10-20% of the time, or if we don't hit, that means we don't kill them in one shot. And as Crow explained, I actually do retain the charge attacks for that reason. And also it gives me the opportunity to see which charge attack level I'm using. So in a sense, we kind of know which charge attacks we are going to be using, and for this case, I'm going to choose a charge attack which gives the boy enough invulnerability to get close to the boss without getting hit and trying to hit the boss. However, if the boss hits me after I miss, or anything like that, he would have a high chance of moogling me. So you need to be very adaptive, so to speak, in case you miss or your attack just doesn't kill the bosses. You need to just be prepared for that scenario. And well, that actually went surprisingly smoothly so far. So upcoming, I'm going to be saving again, because the next boss can really easily dispatch of you if you are not, well, if you're unlucky really, since it's not a particularly high chance of that happening, but it can happen. It's actually pretty long ago since that happened to me last time.
Yeah, it's basically the same issue with the next boss as there was with the Fire Gigas, where the boss has a AoE spell that's supposed to target 3 party members, but since it gets focused onto 2, in the event that Yagamoth does not kill Jabberwocki in his first attack, there's a possibility that Jabberwocki will happen to cast that spell and that'll just wipe the party. And he doesn't really have any control over that. Mm-hmm. So for marathon safety, he takes the save in the inn back there.
Indeed. Actually, there is a small backup you can try. There's about a 2 or 3 frame window for the sprite where he can open the menu after the spell hits, but before the spell actually does damage. But hitting that window on the sprite and the girl is not reliable at all. It's actually kind of reliable to hit on the boy, because he operates on a slightly different frame rule than the other 2 characters. Also, speaking of frame rules, the entire game operates on frame rules, which means certain actions can happen only at certain intervals. For humans, that is kind of impossible to tell when what is, or how it works, but for the matter of, well, how big is the window for me to get the correct charge attacks in order for us to hit the bosses with exactly the attack that we want, it's actually a bigger window than it initially appears to be. Every 2 frames the charge attack changes, which means originally you would have the idea of, oh, so that means you have 2 frames of time in order for you to get the correct charge attack. But in reality you have more like 4 frames, because the menu on the other characters cannot be opened any earlier, or well, later for that matter. Alrighty, and here we have the Jabberwocki. Jabberwocki most of the time is pretty nice, and also his hitbox is kind of messed up. Let me explain. In boss battles, your melee weapons have twice the range, but Jabberwocki on top of that... On top of that... Oh, come on! Give me the demonstration. That's actually really unfortunate.
game is not cooperating with Yagamoth's attempt to explain
Nope.
that Jabberwocky's hitbox is actually significantly below where you see him. It would make sense if you were trying to attack the heads or something, but actually you can attack significantly below his feet and you still hit him. We won't be able to see that in practice here because Jabberwocki has dodged so many attacks in a row that he's walked to the bottom of the arena, and now you get to see a lot of what Jabberwocki does. Fortunately, the spells that he cast here were Poison Gas, which is technically a physical attack and not a magic one. If he had cast Acid Storm, which is the magic spell he knows, then that would likely have wiped him, unless if he got the pause interruption of the incoming death that he had mentioned before.
Indeed. Alrighty, real quick, next thing here is where the first thing. Let me just explain this. The third character is now talking to Luca. Now I'm disabling the multi-tap here via the button, and then suddenly the boy is being well, once again, AI controlled, and that means I can walk during this cutscene. This actually only saves about 20-ish seconds compared to, well, not doing this in this area, and also just subsequently the next cutscene where I'm also going to be using that trick. So for the most part, up until recently-ish, having a multi-tap was mostly a small time save and mostly for convenience, since you could just unselect characters in screen transitions and, well, other various pretty convenient areas. However, at some point I discovered a different way to do, well, a path through the mid-game, and that just kind of changed everything. You will see that a bit later. Also, I just forgot to do the thing. Whoopsie. It's okay.
Long and short of it is that we used to just lump in runs that had the multi-tap available as the same category as just a normal multiple controller run. But when you see the new way that we have to get through the Grand Palace later, you'll see why that has required people that have access to the multi-tap to be only competing with each other and not competing with other players that might be on, say, Virtual Console, who literally cannot plug in a multi-tap and turn it on and off.
Indeed. So, alrighty, we have little pebblers here. I think Crow just straight up defeated those guys with magic. I don't have that luxury, and so I'm kind of subject to, well, missing them, because for some reason those little pebbler hedgehogs or whatever sonics, they have the same amount of evasion rating that bosses have, which means about 40% of the time I'm just going to straight up miss them. So this guy here, he was actually in range, but unfortunately the boy kind of missed, and he missed again. There's not much I can do about that, aside from trying again. There we go, alrighty. 3 attacks for 3 peddlers, that is pretty average. So also in the previous cutscene I just completely forgot to turn on the third controller for the multi-tap, because I actually recently ran more the no multi-tap category, so I'm not quite used to this anymore. But I figured for today, we want to actually give a showcase of the new route with multi-tap, since that I don't think has been displayed anywhere. Although yesterday I actually just happened to get a new record on that category, with an amazing run, except the multi-tap portion. As to the main reason why we even do that, it should save time, but it didn't for short. It cost me about 3.5 minutes or so. The rest of the run was actually pretty good. And you will see soon-ish, I guess in about 40 minutes, as to why that's going to be a thing. Also, I'm walking in the wrong direction here. The reason for that is because I was silenced or, well, confused. And here, let me try to hit this guy real quick. Crow, if you could take over.
Sure. Springbeak is a very annoying boss to try to defeat with weapons rather than magic. Springbeak has a shield on his beak, and if any part of your attack connects with the beak, then the game just negates the attack altogether.
I really hope the sprite is in control.
Yeah, I'm very worried about this boss ending because while this arena is in boss form, you are allowed to walk further up in the screen than the actual screen transition. So because Yagamoth happened to get the whirlwind attack with the boy, after the boss was defeated, he wound up ending his attack above the exit. So if the party had reformed on the boy instead of on the sprite, then he would have been stuck in the wall, and that would have been a soft lock, and he would have had to reload his pre-Jabberwocki save and continue from there.
Yep.
But
that would have been pretty bad.
Yeah. Usually the game will form up the party after a boss on whichever character had most recently brought up a menu. So normally that is whichever character he was controlling the weapon charge glitch through, rather than the character that is actually doing the damage.
Indeed. Also here, we just picked up Sylph, the mana summon spirit of wind, and we now have wind spells, which we are only going to be using once. And also on top of that, we did not steal the mana seed of wind, because, well, we don't have to, so we don't. Pretty simple. So, I've had that soft lock on the Spring Beak before I knew about what could happen. Here, I was actually really worried just now. But I'm pretty sure, because in the 1-player 2-controller category, you pretty much always have the menu open on the secondary characters, which is pretty much always the girl or the sprite. It should gather the party on them instead. Which, by the way, speaking of which, we don't run the Japanese version of this game because of that being a really big issue in the Japanese version. Especially, I think they fixed it on Virtual Console, but the short version is, in the Japanese version, the game actually assigns events to your characters who had the menu open last. And AI-controlled characters cannot actually activate menus, which means if the event was to teleport you out of the arena or open up a passage, then if you switch character after defeating a boss in the Japanese version, there was a very real chance of you just straight up soft-locking in that game, or in that version for that matter. So that game is unfortunately quite busted in the Japanese version.
Yeah, as I understand it, in stores, the Japanese version of this game was sold next to a sign that literally said something to the effect of, "Please do not press the select button during boss fights or the game may crash. Sorry for the inconvenience."
Yep. Which is pretty rough for this game. There's exactly one Japanese runner from something like 2013, and there are a lot more Seigen Densetsu 3 runners than that. Which is kind of hard to understand if you don't necessarily know about the soft locking, since Seigen Densetsu 3, while being a fine game, is not as good of a speedrun, in my opinion, honestly. Since this game here, every glitch just kind of flows into each other quite well. Also, I hit those guys from off-screen in order for them to hopefully not cast silence on me. Well, and they did anyways just now. And also those little owls, they just love, well, hitting you while you are, whoopsie, in confusion status. Here, yeah. This orb here needs to be activated by casting a spell on it, and that opens up a passage. We have done that a few times, but I just wanted to point it out specifically here. Ah, come on, stop silencing me.
Yeah, the way the owls work is that if the current target that they have, whoever is closest to them, is already afflicted with silence, then instead of attacking like once every 5 seconds or so, they instead attack approximately 6 times a second, and they can keep you permanently stun locked, basically until the silence wears off. We have enough armor that we likely wouldn't die to that, but it still is a pretty significant time loss.
Indeed. Also, here we just had a boss. That was the last boss who did not have an evasion rating, which means if your attacks connect, that they will always deal damage instead of the 40% chance to miss. But he was also the first boss who had more than 1000 HP. Your damage is capped at 999, which means the further we go, the more times I need to hit the bosses in order to actually defeat them, which will be ramping up fairly quickly once we acquire the Flammy Drum to be able to fly around. And by the way, this one here is Flammy. Flammy is pretty young and will grow up really quickly throughout the game, so we can actually ride on him / her in order to fly around the world, and hopefully I don't get lost this time. But yeah.
Yagamoth has a bit of a reputation for not remembering what the world map for this game looks like.
Indeed, it's just kind of wrong way. Oh no, that was the whoopsie. Yeah, that cost me quite a few minutes throughout my speedrunning career. Not just in this game, but pretty much every game, I guess. That's what I do. Alrighty. Either way, now, after we defeat the Great Viper, we have the option to either go to the Kakara Desert or we go into the Frost Country. We choose to go into the Kakara Desert first because unless you actually complete the... Oopsie, don't talk to the sign. Unless you... Unless you complete getting lost in the desert by being shot from here into the desert first, you can actually not fly directly from the ice country directly over to the desert. Since, well, the cutscene or the event where you get lost can only start from here, you would have to go through the mushroom village. And just kind of, well, that's slower. Even though we actually need to go over to the ice country and then back to the desert in order to complete the sequence of events. So either way, we get lost in the desert and, well, now we just run all the way in various areas. So fun fact about this area here, you can go up, left, down, right, up in order to get through the desert, or up, right, down, left, up, or up, right, up, left, up, or up, left, up, right, up. I think those are the 4 options. Or you can just wrap around the area until you eventually find the correct screen. The short version is, you want to land in the screen that is just directly behind where you spawned. And the entire area wraps around. Which, speaking of wrap around, all maps in Secret of Mana do actually wrap around. Once you essentially reach the end of one area, you eventually wrap around to the other end, and that's just for the entire game. It isn't exactly relevant, but just a little fun fact. Also a little fun fact, if you press the B button just 1 frame after you gain control over your character, which I didn't get, you can actually remotely interact with certain NPCs or objects that are loaded into the screen. Essentially, the game keeps continuously updating a value as to how far away you are from a specific entity, as an NPC or a treasure chest or something like that, for example. And what that does for you is that, well, if the game has not yet updated the value what is in there right after you gain control over your character, that means there is a good chance that the game thinks, oh, you are close enough to the character to interact with him, and you can just remotely talk to that character, the NPC, or interact with a mana seed or something like that. Please do not block my way, thank you very much. Also, fun fact, when you hold the B button and R button, you can actually moonwalk in this game. It doesn't serve much of a purpose other than just for fun, but I just felt like pointing that out to you.
This would be a good time to talk again about the girl who, until now, has been absent from our party. Near the beginning of the game, we skipped the cutscene where we were supposed to fight some werewolves and rescue her. Because of that, the girl's name was never initialized, so a bunch of 255 numbers in the uninitialized memory wind up translating into the 2 letters G-O whenever the text parser goes through them. So that's why she winds up having 12 goes as her name. At this point, the party was supposedly split apart and then gets put back together. The still uninitialized girl has now been thrown into the party as a result of that. and now she's just going to be along for the ride for the rest of the game. She does still have the glove equipped, which is the weapon you're supposed to get whenever you get her into the party. But as soon as we put the whip on her right there, now the glove is just not a thing we will ever be able to obtain ever.
Yep.
And the girl it's fairly important that the girl stays alive during this fight here. If for whatever reason Mech Rider started dashing across the screen and killed her off, we would need to revive her, so that if you just saw the bottom of the screen, her HP just went up from 45 to 104 because she gained 1 billion levels.
Indeed. And also here, convenient enough, we just get to the section where we buy new equipment. This is going to be the last set of equipment I'm buying for the rest of the game, and it's also, well, it very very quickly pays off, since the next area is going to be the Ice Country, and in the Ice Country we have enemies, the wolves. They are called howlers. Those guys are really not nice. They have insane attack range, really quick attacks, and just overall really mess with you. So I'm going to equip my cactus, and I will also be equipping a frost saber on my cactus. So what does a frost saber do for us, Crow?
Frost saber makes your weapons turn enemies into snowmen 75% of the time whenever you attack. So snowmanned enemy will suddenly just basically not be considered an enemy at all. Your AIs do not aggress on them, and you cannot actually deal any further damage. So if you're playing this game casually and you are attempting to kill enemies in an area, Frost Saber actually slows you down by quite a bit because it renders the enemies invincible, assuming they survive your first attack. If you want to kill enemies, then the Stone Saber is much better. But just in general, most of the time when he attacks a Howler with a Frost Saber weapon, for 3 attacks per sabered up weapon, he will render the enemy helpless, as far as he's concerned, permanently. It will eventually thaw, but not until after he's gone much further along. Whereas if he just attacks the enemy, like he did with the boy there, whose Frost Saber had already worn out, then the Howler will get an opportunity to recover, and as you can see, as soon as you start taking any damage from these enemies, they tend to group up on you and keep your party pretty well stun-locked for quite some time.
Indeed, and that's one of the big reasons why we just upgrade our equipment before we go here. So, here, I actually plan on killing off the lady if I get the opportunity to do so quickly, but I will not actually be spending time trying to do so if, well, she doesn't die just on her own. There we go, that's good. The reason for that is later on I will want to kill off the lady again, and in order for me to do so quickly, I want her to have slightly less maximum HP than she would ordinarily have if she always just survived. So that was pretty much straight up intentional there, killing her off. That is not going to be until a fair bit later, but every little bit of experience less than her means I have a bit of a higher chance. However, it's only saving you about 5 seconds if she is low enough level to die in 2 hits instead of 3, that it's not really worth spending much time trying to kill off the lady. So if you can just do it on the side, that's great. If not, that's okay too. So either way, what I just did there is I messed up this cutscene. In this cutscene, you're supposed to get onto this podium. The green guy asks you, hey, can you pay attention so no one opens the stove? Then you open the stove anyway. Salamando, the summon spirit of fire, pops out and gives you his powers, and then he disappears where he appears here. Then you talk to the Scorpion group, which are just kind of not seeing, and you cannot see them here, but they're going to appear as soon as this cutscene ends, because, well, they say bye, and they appear. Either way, the entire cutscene is just really messed up because I skipped the first section of walking onto the podium and initiating talk with that guy. So essentially, oh, no, that's bad.
Okay, while you focus on the howlers here, I think I would like to answer a question I saw in chat. Someone asked how it is that we know that it is a 75% chance for the Frost Saber to hit. For that sort of information, we have some people that do digging into the code of the game to thank. So HHS is a TAS videos guy that's given us a lot of information. Specifically, I know the 75% number from a tool that was produced by someone who goes by Moppleton. Moppleton created a tool called Secret of Mana Editor, and in there you can see that each individual weapon codes how frequently it inflicts status effects, and it just turns out that all the weapons you gain access to have 75% chances. Enemies sometimes have only a 25% chance, like most of the enemies that inflict poison have that chance. Moppleton also has made a ROM hack of this game that he's still working on. It's not done yet, but it's Ancient Cave for Secret of Mana. If you're familiar with Lufia 2, it's kind of a roguelike, randomly generated dungeon kind of an idea, where your party gets stronger as you collect things as you go through.
Indeed.
But now we need to do a skip through the Fire Palace. We have skipped the Ice Palace entirely, and we are now going to the Fire Palace, where we are going to do what we call barrel launching to fly up this ramp. Flying up that ramp gets us through the Fire Palace without going through a particular room in the basement. Once you reach that room in the basement, the game causes the Fire Palace mana seed to become stolen, and in order to retrieve it, you need to go through the Ice Palace. In a typical playthrough, you would have retrieved the seed first, and then you would go through the Fire Palace. But since we never went into the basement at all, and instead just flew up a ramp that was supposed to be a one-way exit, we can now get through the Fire Palace without the Fire Palace seed becoming stolen, so we don't need to deal with Santa at all. And yes, the boss of the Ice Palace is Santa Claus. And now we are going to walk through walls, and that is accomplished by casting a spell and then attacking a whip pole. Kind of like we did early on in the game. Whenever you stab a whip pole, your party is allowed to walk through walls for a bit. And this becomes easier, and the effect gets extended for longer whenever a party member is attempting to cast a spell of any kind while you're starting that. And that brings us to about now.
Indeed, thank you very much. So, wow, Minotaurus was actually really nice for once. He's one of those bosses which, ordinarily, he doesn't do too much. And sometimes you can kill him in 2 hits. But sometimes he also decides to defend and cast a bunch of spells and dodge your attacks. It can actually get pretty ugly. But hey, today he was nice to me, that is awesome. So yeah, we completely messed up the events in the Fire Palace. The seed in the Fire Palace here should have been stolen now, but well, it wasn't. So we can just seal this mana seed here, and then we go and fly to the next area, since the next cannon travel location is now unlocked.
This is one of the few mana seeds we actually need to seal. Once you seal this mana seed, that is the trigger for being allowed to enter the Empire.
Indeed, and the Empire is going to basically be the beginning of what I call the mid-game, where stuff starts hitting really hard and you need to start being really careful about avoiding everything, especially in that first section that we run through the sewers. But before the sewers, normally you're supposed to do a little side mission where, well, you go to the top left of the town, where you find a lady called Mara, and she is one of the spies, and she knows the code which you need to enter the sewers. Well, normally you need the code to enter the sewers. However, what I'm going to be doing is I will be aligning my characters perfectly with the wall which means I will be pixel perfect, pressed against the wall, and just straight up walk around the cutscene trigger that is supposed to happen, where... Let's see, here on the bottom right you can see the entrance to the sewers, just on the right side of the wall here. Normally there will be a man standing in front of it if you just go over there the regular way, but I will be skipping the trigger where the man would go in front of that sewer section. Let's see, do I have... No, I don't have the alignment.
Yeah, he's looking at the shadow underneath his character compared to the art of the wall in order to determine whether he has gotten himself onto an odd or an even pixel. Normally when you walk in this game, you move 2 pixels per frame, whereas if you run, you move 3 pixels per frame. So after a dash, you will kind of randomize whether you are standing on odd or even pixels, and then from then on, as long as you're walking, you'll stay on the right one. If he has mashed himself into the wall on pixel perfect fashion, then he can avoid the trigger that was supposed to put the guard in front of the sewer's entrance. And this is the sewers themselves. The sewers are rather tricky in a few ways. First of all, the dino fish that just kind of wrecked him, once they start pouncing, they tend to just keep pouncing on your characters, and it's kind of hard to get out. They can also cast magic, and in this room that he's currently having a bit of trouble in, the AI has a very hard time figuring out how to get out of the stairway right there. And he elected to use a barrel in its intended way in order to just block all of the attacks, all the physical attacks from enemies, while he just slowly crept his way through the rest of the sewers. Another danger, in fact, usually the bigger danger in the sewers is the blue drop enemies, which you are supposed to be familiar with from the Ice Palace. Blue drops inflict the same frosty status that we put onto the Howlers onto you if they hit you. He managed to get past all of those safely, but if you happen to have a frosted boy or girl at the start of the cutscene where you just met the resistance right there, then the game actually soft locks because the characters are supposed to do some animations, and the snowman version of yourself doesn't have those animations.
Indeed, it's actually a pretty weird soft lock. Also, snowmen can even